Uh, Hello, guys. My name is Tanay, and today I'll just be sharing with you guys more about my mindfulness journey, and more specifically, given the topic of today's webinar, how I've been using the lessons I learned through mindfulness to kind of reconnect with my parents. So to start off, I'll give you a brief introduction about myself, like even though Frank has given me a wonderful introduction. So I lived in Kenya and grew up there my whole life. And then I moved to Singapore in July 2016 to study engineering at NUS. And regarding my relationship with my family, it had always been very harmonious and very good. So I'd never really given it much thought. But that kind of changed over the course of this semester in one lesson that we did in our mindfulness class. So we were told to write letters to our parents. And I ended up writing a very emotional letter, telling my parents how much I love them and how much they mean to me. And my plan was that once this lesson is over, I'm just going to go fold this letter and hide it somewhere no one else can ever find it. But Prof. Angie had different plans for us. She asked us to share our letters with our parents. And as she was saying that, I was thinking to myself, dude, if you send these letters back home, mom and dad are going to think there's something seriously wrong with you. And I wasn't the only person who felt this way. But as I thought more about why I feel this way, one thing that came to my realization was that I know that I love my parents very much and that I really respect them. But do they know how much they mean to me? And along the same lines, why am I so afraid to share with them how I feel about them? And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that over the past 4 years since I came to Singapore, our relationship had become a bit more distant. And I was wondering why this happened. And it also made me want to change and kind of grow our relationship back to what it used to be. So in the subsequent slides, I will talk to you about some of the lessons I learned through the module and how I've been applying them in improving my relationship with my parents. So one of the main things that we learned in mindfulness is about the 9 foundational attitudes of mindfulness. Basically, the idea is that by applying these 9 attitudes to our everyday life, we're able to live life in a much more relaxed state of mind and face less stress, or at least get better at facing the challenges in our life. And the 4 values that I've highlighted in blue are what I have been using primarily in improving my relationship with my parents. I'll explain how. So in evaluating the current state of my relationship with my parents, I realized that communication was where it was all going wrong. Because over the past 4 years, I only go back home for an average of 2 months every year. And that's the only time that I get to spend with them. And furthermore, our calls were getting less and less frequent. And this was for 2 main reasons. The first was my mom, like many other moms out there, I presume, worries about me a bit too much. So anytime I shared with her about any stress that I was feeling, she would talk to me about how she starts losing sleep over it. But once I realized this, I was like, is there any point in me sharing the stresses I feel if it affects my mom so much? Because of this, every time we talked and she asked me how I was, no matter what I was going through, I would say, I'm doing just fine. And even though she might have felt less stressed, as a result of this, I felt like she no longer understood who I was, why I think the way I think, and what I actually am going through. So once I came to this realization through reflecting on our relationship, I thought of how I could change it. And that's where I started to apply the foundational attitude of trust. So in this case, I had to trust that my mom and my dad are old and mature enough to not overly react to what I'm about to tell them. And at the same time, I had to make sure that when I do tell them about something I am facing, I do so in the right way so that they aren't affected by it too much either. So like by making sure I bring it up at the right time. So recently, for example, once the circuit breaker measures had kicked in, I was spending most of my time by myself in my room and not really going out to meet people. But this is not something that I'm used to doing. As a result of this, I started feeling a bit more down and my appetite was affected. And usually I would never tell my parents about something like this. But one afternoon, while I was talking to them, I was like, oh yeah, but because of our stay-at-home notice, we can't really go out anymore. And I spend most of my time alone, hence I'm feeling a bit down. And to my surprise, they actually took that quite well. Rather than coming at me and like worrying about me too much, they were able to offer solutions, for example, Skyping more often, which helped us get closer together. And at the same time showed me that all I had to do was be honest with them about how I was feeling, and that they would be able to offer solutions that I had never thought of before. And another reason why our communication had become less strained was because of time. The longer I stayed at NUS, the more activities I started taking up. And at the same time, my classes were getting harder and harder. So this left me with a lot less time to call back home. From my usual 2 calls a day, I was now calling them on average once every 2 days. But while I was thinking about how I can increase the amount of time I spend with my parents, I realized the power of perception. And what I mean is, everything that goes on in our life, we can choose how we want to view the situation. And by choosing how we view the situation, we can decide how that situation affects us. So again, I'll share with you guys an experience that I had recently with my parents. So my mom is a teacher back home in Kenya. And as a result of the recent COVID situation, all the classes have been moved online. But because of this, she finds it a bit more hard to teach her students and connect with them, because she's not very adept at using Microsoft Teams, and she's having a relatively hard time getting used to it. So when she was facing these problems, the first person she turned to was me, asking me how she can improve her lessons through Microsoft Teams. And when she came to me with that question, I realized I have 2 ways in which I can view this. Like, the first perception is, oh my God, I already have very little time, and now she wants me to spend even more time helping her. And if I approach it from that scenario, I will keep resenting her because I get to spend less time doing what I want to do and spend more time just listening to her tell me about what she's facing. But the alternative way of viewing the situation from my perspective was, oh wow, this is an opportunity for me to help my mom become a better teacher virtually, and for us to spend some meaningful time together. By reframing the situation in my mind in this manner, I'm able to approach it with a much more positive outlook, and I'm able to be more patient and enthusiastic while I'm talking to her. So over the past 2 weeks, we Skype almost every day. And every day she shares with me one problem she faced while teaching, and I talk to her and try to help solve the problem for her. And I feel like our relationship just over the past 2 weeks has evolved a lot more. And we feel a lot more happy simply talking to each other. And while so far I have been talking about communication from the talking perspective, I would like to highlight that listening is an equally, if not more important aspect of communication. And this was taught to me very practically in a very recent event that happened in my life. So a few months ago, my granduncle, who in the UK, was very ill, and he was in the hospital. The doctor said that there would be a very low chance of him surviving. My sister also lives in the UK, and she decided to go visit him in the hospital. And while she was there, she saw the condition he was in, and she was affected by it a lot. She got very sad. So that evening, while we were talking, she gave me a call, and she was sharing with me how she feels. But you see, the thing is that I don't think about death the same way she does. Because as a wise man once said, quote, "To the well-organized mind, death is but the next great adventure," end quote. And because of my perspective on death, I wasn't able to relate to her. So while she was explaining to me how she feels, I quickly interrupted her, and I offered an alternative point of view, telling her that she could potentially think of death this way. Needless to say, that didn't help. You see, all she needed at that point in time was someone to listen to her. And even though my intentions behind sharing my point of view were good, that was not the right time to share how I feel. So what I've learned is that sometimes the best thing we can offer someone else is a safe space to share how they're feeling. And that might be what they need at that point in time. So as I come to the end of communication, I just want to say that before I say anything, these are 4 questions that I always ask myself before I go ahead and say it. Is it true? Is it beneficial? Is this the right time and place for me to say what I'm about to say? And am I using the right words to express myself? And if I'm able to say yes to all of these questions, then I know that I can go ahead and say what I'm about to say. And if the answer to any of these questions is no, then I might have to rethink what I'm saying and perhaps save it for another day. And as I come to the end of the presentation, there's one important lesson that I would want to share with all of you. and that is the importance of loving unconditionally. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because sometimes when you love someone, you often find yourself being asked, oh, but what is it about this person you love? And the thing is that if you love someone for a certain trait, what happens when that trait changes? So again, I can give you an experience that I had while growing up. Like, I generally had high academic achievements, but as a result of that, my parents would always say that they're very proud of me for my achievements and that they love me very much. But then I started thinking to myself that what happens if I stop doing well in my academics? Will they still love me? And the thought of not being loved anymore, that's terrifying. So oftentimes I would let go of other things that I enjoy doing more, just so I can spend more time studying and continue to do well academically, because at least that way my parents would still love me, right? But in forcing myself to do something that I don't really want to do, slowly I started building up this image in my mind of how my parents only want me to do well and they don't care about how I feel. It leads to a lot of resentment. So what I learned is that when we express our love towards someone, we should learn to do so simply for the person that they are, and not because of any action that they do or any particular characteristic of them. And one way to do this is by letting go of any expectations we hold of the other person. By loving unconditionally, we create a relationship where we're a lot more free to express ourselves for who we truly are. And as I come to the end of the presentation, I just want to say that this is not something that you can change overnight. We're all starting off at different points and we're going to different destinations. But what's important is that you enjoy the journey along the way and make the most of it and make some very many happy memories. With that, I've come to the end of the presentation. Thank you.